Scours on the sow farm, what's going on, how to manage it. To help us understand that is Dr. Tom Petznick. You got tongue-tied there. Tom received his DVM from Kansas State University back in 1995. Most of his career, he's been in livestock medicine role, main focus on swine. He has a private practice with one associate and clients primarily in Nebraska and Kansas. He recently came back here and enrolled in a master's program here at VDPAM, Veterinary Diagnostic and Production Animal Medicine at ISU. So welcome, Dr. Petznick. I did it again.
That's fine.
My wife has an uncle with that name, so I should be able to pronounce it. But thank you for being here.
You bet. Thank you. Is this coming through okay, or do I need to adjust? We're good? Okay. Do we need to broadcast to the screen now?
Does not get up there. There you go.
Excellent, thank you. So appreciate everybody's interest in this particular topic. It's one that I've been doing a lot of work with lately. If you've been to some of the other meetings, you've probably heard me more talk about sapovirus specifically. But in this one, I was asked to talk more about the total approach, total management of scours in the farrowing house. I think it's just such an important thing. You know, we constantly hear the number with PRRS, and not to downplay PRRS, but we always hear the $600 million a year. But I think if we really looked at diarrhea in farrowing, that alone in itself, and then how that directly impacts the diarrhea that comes right out of farrowing in the nursery, I think we'd be quite shocked how high that number is that's costing us every year. And I think the good news that I can leave you with here, just to summarize the whole thing, would be is we can fix it. Okay, so it's not something that we have to live with. If you're sitting there and you're walking through and say, yeah, this is just normal, well, a smart veterinarian once told me it's not normal. It may be common, but it's not normal. So we can fix diarrhea in the farrowing house, and I'll kind of go through here and hopefully leave you with what my approach is. So as we discuss this, we're gonna define the problem. I think that's probably one of the most important parts of this is once we define what the problem or problems are, then we have a lot better chance. So what is it? Where is it? When is it? And then we're going to talk a little bit here about the usual suspects, like who, rotavirus, all those types of things. We'll go into the definitive culprits, like which one of these is it specifically, and figuring that out. And then solving the problem. We'll go through some management interventions, talk about pig flow, husbandry, things like that, and we'll go into treatment and immunization. I look at treatment as that's our short-term option, hopefully, if we can figure out the management and the immunity. But in the meantime, we have to save some pigs. And then we'll go into the immunization, and that's from a couple different routes and a lot of different options. The good news is today we have lots of tools in our tool belt when it comes to diarrhea. And then if we have time, we'll see, I put in a few bonus slides in here on something I might segue into if we have time, and talking about now how do we take this and how do we learn from that problem for a lot of things other than diarrhea. So usually this is how it starts. I get the phone call. Now, occasionally it's that I'm out on a herd visit and I'm like, you guys have diarrhea, why haven't you said something? But usually now people are pretty attuned to it. Most of the herds that I cover, we would have about 20 farms, sow farms that cover about 60,000 sows. And I would say the majority of the time we're not dealing with any kind of what I would call significant amount of diarrhea inside that sow farm. So I get the call. And I'll skip down to probably the sixth one there on the list, and that one's usually pretty apparent. First of all, let's just talk about it. Is it coronavirus? Is it a TGE? Is it a PED? Is it a Delta? Because obviously we deal with that a lot differently than anything else. We get in and we get to providing immune management immediately. So I'm sure you guys have all been plenty familiar with how to deal with those types of episodes. It's not going to be the main topic of this. But then this would be more for the, I got a nuisance diarrhea, or hey, it might be pretty significant. It's killing some pigs, but we really, really don't feel like it's a coronavirus. So how old are those pigs? Are they, I usually break this down between 0 and 5 days to 6 and up days. Sometimes there's a little bit of a transition there in the 5, 6, 7 days, but in my practice, we tend to see certain things on the early ones and certain things on the late ones. And then, is it in certain rooms? You know, unrelated to diarrhea, but I had a call yesterday morning talking about some pigs in a finisher that were struggling. They all came from the same source. They all came at the same time, but this one room was a problem. Well, we ended up figuring out that that was a feed problem. So I'm going to deal with a certain room having a problem, even if they're in the same age group versus otherwise. That gets us into a lot of environmental things and things like that. I need to understand, is there parity differences? Is this only in gilts? Is it only in sows, which is rare, but it happens? And then, or is it really kind of everything? What's the response to treatment? Most of the time, they've already seen a little bit of the diarrhea. They've already started with our treatment protocols. Are you getting a response or are you not getting a response? That gives me a heads up to understand if that's bacterial or if it's viral. And then lastly, you know, has there been any changes in management? Oh yeah, we had a cold snap. We weren't quite winterized up. You know, just looking for the easy picking things to say, hey, we don't really have a new diarrhea problem. We have a management problem that's causing diarrhea. Okay, so just kind of getting that landscape helps me start to develop my plan. So then we're going to look at the usual suspects. So I would classify those into really 3 main categories. They're either going to be bacterial, of which the vast majority of what I see in the field for bacterial is going to be either Clostridium perfringens A, or it's going to be E. coli. Now, obviously, I know that Clostridium perfringens C is out there, and I've been in practice since '95, but I have yet to diagnose that. I know it's still out there, so we won't cover a lot of that. That's not really my expertise. Mostly what we have had is A and E. coli. Now, salmonella, it's kind of a tough one. Some people say, well, you can't get salmonella that young. I've had at least one case over the years, but it's very, very rare that that's a salmonella issue there. And then the other usual suspects, coronaviruses, rotaviruses, and now, you know, we're finally to the point where sapovirus is actually, it's a usual suspect. Okay, we've built it up to that point where we figured out that it's broad spread enough that we really have to have that on our rule out list, and that'll be dependent on the time when they break, and we'll go into that in a minute. At the same time, we've got that one organism, the one that honestly gives me the most frustration when we do have it, and I know it's frustrating to a lot of people out in the field, is coccidiosis. Not really a bacteria, not really a virus. It's a protozoal organism, but it certainly can cause some really big impact. And then I think we always need to, just like what sapovirus used to be, we need to keep our thought on that, hey, maybe there's something new. I mean, there's other coronaviruses that we hear about reported in other countries. There's other things that cause diarrhea infectious-wise. We just have to do our due diligence, break down to what's really causing the diarrhea, and then when the usual suspects aren't doing it, then we've got to go deeper. So talking about that timing, day 0 to 5, most of the time, if they tell me it's day 0 to 5, especially if it's day 0 to 3, almost always I can tell you that's going to be a Clostridium A, or it's going to be a rotavirus A, B, or C, or combination thereof. Okay? Every once in a while, we'll see some E. coli, and I actually don't see a lot of actual outbreaks of E. coli and farrowing. Usually it leads back to something wrong with other diseases like PRRS, or it leads back to a vaccination problem, but I put plus minus E. coli because we obviously still have to rule that out. Those day 0 to 5s are very impactful on morbidity and mortality. They're like, wow, I have a problem, and I could mistake those for a coronavirus right up front. Some of those really hot Clostridiums, some of those rotaviruses, especially if they're co-infected together, you might think that you have coronavirus for a while, and you just get lucky that by the next day or the day after, it hasn't spread to the late lactation, and the sows aren't scouring, so you feel pretty good it's probably one of the other two. So that gives me a big piece of already understanding what we're probably up against is knowing if they're day 0 to 5. Because when they get to day 6 to weaning, we still will have a few E. coli's, but that's really becomes where rotavirus also has a different look when it comes to the later infections. Sapovirus, I have yet to diagnose it less than 6 days. I heard somebody say something about 5 days, and I'm not saying it's not impossible before that, but I haven't found it yet. And then coccidiosis, because of its nature of the pig gets infected in the crate after it's born, it takes a little while, and so really you start seeing clinical there also, maybe 5 days, but 6 to 7 days for sure. And the morbidity here is probably the bigger piece of the puzzle. So if you remember with gut physiology, is that the enterocytes that Dr. Wilson was talking about before, I can remember it now. So the enterocytes turn over at a certain pace. They're just like our skin cells in that sense. Our skin cells are constantly shedding. We just don't notice the shedding that our enterocytes are doing. It's just part of our stools. Part of the pig stools, but they're constantly shedding. And in a newborn baby piglet, up until they're at least a week age, that is a really slow process. They just don't regenerate very fast. Hence why PED is such a devastating problem for pigs less than 7 days old. It's still not good for pigs older than 7 days old, but then you get sows who it's kind of a nuisance to the sows other than they have an upset stomach and don't eat, maybe abort every once in a while. But the whole thing here is the morbidity is a lot different. It's less mortality because those pigs don't dehydrate. They have more morbidity where they just you kind of see that gravy stool. You see maybe they just kind of have a toothpastey stool. It's just not a nice formed turd, okay, for lack of a better term. So the mortality really starts to come down there was that just not a good enough pig to wean? So when it's not a good enough pig to wean, then it might end up getting euthanized either before they're weaned or the nursery say, no, you're not sending us that. So other than that, the morbidity is the big thing on those late ones. It's very different. It's very difficult to differentiate that. You know, I used to think right in the early parts of sapovirus, I thought I could say, oh yeah, that's sapovirus. Well, I went into a group of herds after we diagnosed it in the first farm because we were seeing similar type of stools. And so it was a group of 4 farms that had just very much the same, they had the same gilt replacement, they had the same management, they had the same overall health. And in the process of about a month, I went through those 4 farms and saw that type of stool and took samples to diagnose it. One of those was sapo only. One of those was coccidiosis. One of those was rota and sapo, and one was rota only. So good luck trying to figure that one out. We always like to be able to look and say, oh yeah, that's what it is, but I think you'll be fooled, and hence we need to do diagnostics. So we have to get a definitive diagnosis. If we're not after definitive diagnosis, and what that includes is not just what I mainly found, that means what else is there. And so I usually start a couple different ways. Sometimes if it's a real big problem, we may go straight to the right side at the pig level. But if I just have that nuisance problem and it's just lingering and it's just, come on, we got to get better than this, then I'll kind of take a broad overlook first. And what I'll do there, and if I fast forward here, on the left side there, we'll go into the loadout, and as long as you have a team that's doing a good job of washing, disinfecting in general, letting that area dry between their loads, then once you march pigs across there, sure enough, they're going to urinate, they're going to have diarrhea if they have it, they're just going to defecate all over the place on their way to going out the door. Now, that being said, even in a perfectly washed, disinfected loadout, you probably still could come in there and find some residual antigen, but this usually is a pretty clear message when it's really, really strong. Okay, so we're getting strong CTs. Is there sapovirus there? Is there rotavirus there? We can do bacterial culture, but I don't usually there because most of my bacterial problems on the early side, and that's Clostridium, and that's a whole different story. But we'll come in here and we'll basically do an environmental swab of that, and then we can either do a fecal float. Believe it or not, we can do a fecal float if you get enough material on there for coccidia, or we could also run the Cryptoisospora PCR that we're starting to do a few of those. So this just kind of gives you the broad overview. Hey, I thought this was all sapo. Oh no, you know what? I got a 22 CT for rotavirus C. or I have a 18 CT for Rota A and Sapo's only 32. So remember, as those CTs happen, and as you work with your veterinarians, is the stronger the CT, meaning the stronger the CT means a lower score. That's cycle times. That's how quickly it can find it. It doesn't take as many cycles to find that particular organism. So that's just a nice broad general for when you're just not happy with where your level of diarrhea is, especially in late lactation. Then after that, some producers, and myself as a veterinarian, now I want to kind of peel that onion out, and I want to pull it apart, and I want to be able to look down at the tissue level. So I'll go right into the piglets, select 2-3 different pigs throughout the farm at different stages where they're just starting to develop diarrhea. That was key to the SAPO diagnosis is that we were frustrated because we kept getting results back that said we were rotavirus negative, we're coronavirus negative, we're bacterial, nothing significant. And the reply I would always get back is, yeah, there's rotavirus lesions, you must have just missed it. Well, what got us really excited and on this was when I said, okay, I'm going in, I'm picking them out, and you guys are going to let me know who didn't have scours yesterday and does have scours today. So we were able to dial right into those and really check and see that, yeah, this is something new. We have lesions, but we don't have any kind of result. So that's when we did next generation sequencing. So at that point in time, you also have to prove it to yourself some. We've got a lot of good histopath and tissue level diagnostics that we can do. We can obviously still run PCR on those. Histopath will show us the lesions or if it's bacterial, we'll see the colonization of those bacteria along the walls. With coccidiosis, you can sometimes catch the different stages of coccidiosis of the organisms right inside the tissues. And then we can also go even higher advanced with staining that will specifically show whether it's sapovirus, whether it's rotavirus, right down in the enterocytes where the lesions are. So that gets us dialed into what really is going on. Because as you know, there's a lot of healthy pigs I could probably culture Clostridium out of. There's probably a lot of healthy pigs I could culture E. coli out of. So unless I see the lesion, I don't know quite for sure what to target and what not to, or until I see the lesion. And that picture on the right there, that was actually the farm where we diagnosed sapovirus at. This particular pig had more of the gravy type of stool, but then you also see some where it's just kind of almost this shiny, looks like somebody squirted toothpaste in there, just ugly colored toothpaste. Okay, so I can't emphasize enough, get a definitive diagnosis. And then once you've started to solve this problem, then what you want to do is you want to stay active. You want to do some monitoring. We can't run up a diagnostic bill that'll break the bank, but at the same time, we have to stay alert to how we're doing, the progress we're making. I've seen too many farms say all of a sudden they're keyed in on rotavirus or they're keyed in on sapovirus. They get those diagnostics, they make the changes in management, but more so in vaccine to be able to deal with that, and they're like, oh, I still have diarrhea. Well, you didn't go the next step. Did you check for sapo or vice versa? So a lot of these are co-infections, and so we have to make sure we understand everything that's there. So the first place we need to go after that, what do? We got to evaluate our processes because we should be able to deal with the vast majority of our diarrheas, especially if something new pops up and we have a good vaccination program, we have a good health program. We should be able to deal with those with management. All right. So, and the same thing being said is, if you have a dirty farm, you have a chilly farm, you have poor internal biosecurity, you don't have good colostrum management, all the vaccines in the world aren't going to make you any difference. Okay, or at least not get you to the point where you should be. So, this is kind of the checklist of the things that I'll look at. We'll definitely look at sanitation, and that's not just in the lactation; it's in the gestation barns too. We used to wash in sows. I mean, who can remember washing sows in? I mean, fair number of us. So why did we quit doing that? Well, we can get by without it. I'm not suggesting we go back to washing sows. I have nobody that does that. But a big piece of this, the washing the sow, was it helped get a lot of the stuff off in the gestation barn. So those sows out there can be shedding and so forth. We have to make sure not just colostrum management's good. We've gotten really good at that. When we're dialed in on getting colostrum into pigs, we're really, really good at it, but we can't forget that those viruses and bacteria, if they happen to be something that maternal antibody helps with, we have to keep that coming through the milk in the form of IgA. If we don't do that, we're going to have problems. Environment-wise, I can probably assure you, give me one of your best, least amount of scours, farrowing houses that you have, give me 24 to 48 hours with your environmental controls, and I bet you we can get pigs to scour, because it's that important of a deal. So making sure that we're really dialed in on the microenvironment and the macroenvironment at the same time. Don't underestimate all in, all out by room. In a lot of places, we don't do that. It's, well, I only need this many to be weaned today. I still have part of the room left. When you get into a diarrhea problem in particular, don't underestimate how much just finding a way to go in, all out for a period of time will help you out, okay? That even if you can do it every so many rooms, it's a really, really big deal. People flow through the rooms. We have normal traffic, but then also, especially when we're doing routine tasks like processing, when we're going through a diarrhea problem, I'll tell them to reverse. They always tend to be processing the oldest pigs first that need to be done. I'll say, you got to come up with a timeline. How many litters are you going to get done today? Start with the youngest and go to the oldest room, and then make sure that you get done by the end of the day. We tend to want to walk these things out the door, and so moving from youngest pigs to oldest pigs. And then don't forget about the equipment in your room and how much that you can traffic around on a feed cart, on a scraper, on a board, on anything like that that goes in and out of those rooms, and you're just tracking that virus and that bacteria around. So I want to put a special note on sanitation, because this is one that I can't believe in 2023 we haven't figured out everywhere, is the solution to pollution is dilution. And that's, you know, when an animal breaks with disease, it's usually a function of two things. The exposure, the amount of exposure that they have to that disease, and the amount of immunity they have towards it. So it takes very little amounts of exposure if you don't have any immunity. But if you have strong immunity, you can still overcome that with a filthy environment. And so I really focus again on the gestation barns. Almost always when I have coccidiosis, I probably have dirty gestation barns. Okay, so really focusing on how we do our gestation barns and our lactation barns, because we're just basically carrying those pathogens in. And it also creates the argument for, should I be doing pre-farrow feedback? There's a couple organisms that don't respond to pre-farrow feedback. And if anything, you might multiply your problem. And I know that's been a long stored tradition, but today we have a lot of farms that we quit doing feedback pre-farrow. Because if it's Clostridium, if it's Coccidia in particular, we're not quite sure yet with SAPO. We're getting ready to start that study here in the next month or so. Is what you'll do is you'll drag that into the farrowing house and you'll make yourself a time bomb. Okay? When you're fighting Clostridium and coccidiosis in particular, I'd be backing off that pre-farrow feedback. In lactation, we have to have PED level engagement when you have a diarrhea and you expect to clean it up. Man, when we have PED, there is no question where we're at with sanitation. We'll whitewash if we have to. We'll tear up the flooring if we have to. We'll do whatever it takes. Well, we have to deal with that also with our other pathogens that cause diarrhea. Biofilm breakdown is a big one, and making sure that we bust through those biofilms. Usually an alkaline type of product. There's BioClean out there. Was BioSolve. I mean, they all seem to start with bio for some reason. Maybe there's one called Green Clean. But anyway, look for something that's a basic pH. Apply that, foam it on, and that'll help tear a lot of that grime away. And then that allows, if you use this is the one that it just drives me crazy, is we're 2023, and we've known for how many years that hot water matters, yet it's unbelievable how many places we have that don't have hot water still, or the hot water doesn't work. I can't think of the number of times I've walked in and they already told me they have diarrhea, say, well, how's the hot water working? Oh, it's working great. Oh, walking down the hallway, oh, let's grab the line. It's cold as cold can be. Well, maybe it's working great, but they're not using it, okay? So hot water is a huge, huge thing. And then disinfection and or whitewash. I don't think whitewash is non-negotiable. I mean, I think it is negotiable. We've done plenty of the PED outbreaks and all those without it. It maybe speeds things along, but I think probably more importantly than anything, it just kind of brings the awareness because you can see where you've been. But man, people don't like to do it if they don't have to. Let's talk a little bit more about the colostrum and milk management. We talked a little bit about this already. Immune management of sows, given vaccination, doing feedback, makes no difference if we don't get good colostrum and good milk intake, okay? And sometimes, like I said, we've done a good job with colostrum, but the milk intake's a big one. And we have a few things working against us here. We've got too many pigs at times, so that milk is scarce. I can't get a full belly of milk. We've got some poor quality pigs that we're letting hang around on the sow. They're not getting milk, and all of a sudden they lose their antibodies. What are they going to do in the presence of pathogen? Poof. Now I got more exposure to pathogens. I got non-uniform age in rooms, maybe because we're rolling back pigs, maybe because we're picking the youngest pigs to wean out. And so that maternal shell that we get is compromised. And then we have gaps in protection, and those gaps in protection lead to some leakiness of virus, or leakiness of bacteria, one way or another, in the lack of having these antibodies. So lots of different types of antibodies. Obviously, the one that matters the most is IgA when it comes to these secretory diarrheas. Internal biosecurity, I didn't have a picture of it. I wish I did, but I need to get that in my repertoire. But kind of looking at construction ribbon that we use, that you'll see as you drive around different construction sites. Sometimes you see it on stakes so that the guy mowing hopefully sees it. But we've got some, when we're going through diarrhea, definitely with PED, we'll actually tie that onto rooms and call them either clean rooms or dirty rooms, all right? So a red flag means there's scours in that room. A green flag will mean there's not scours in that room. And so trying to manage our internal biosecurity, moving from green rooms to red rooms or orange rooms, is one that we use. If you're serious about resolving diarrhea, you'll adapt to the all in, all out. I'm just gonna say that one more time. The people movement again, there's unnecessary traffic that sometimes happens, and that's where the ribbons have really helped us out. If I'm working red rooms, I am not allowed in green rooms until I go up to the front and I clean up to come back. Youngest to oldest, again, especially with the processing. Fallout pigs, are they worth it? Especially when you're going through a diarrhea, is it really worth it to pull a bunch of pigs off and know that they're lacking milk and that they have a high chance of spreading diarrhea organisms all over the place? We've really started to focus a lot more right now on what we call number sows, is that our fallout management might be day one. Some people would say leave it McRebel. It's unbelievable. When you do solid McRebel, you will clean up a lot of problems. It's just really hard to go there. But if we can create the right match of number of piglets that I have with the number of teats that are functional that I have, and then say, I'm done. If you can't grow and you can't maintain and you can't survive and thrive in that environment, then I need to move on, because I'm creating too many problems trying to put other sows together with pigs. And don't forget the fomites. So that's a lot of how I get to where I'm going. We want a definitive diagnosis. I make sure I break down and say, okay, do I really need to create a vaccine? Do I really need to sequence to see if I need to change the vaccine? Do I really need to go to a bunch of treatment if I have management problems that are wrong? Sometimes we do. So in the meantime, I have to do something to save pigs or to reduce the amount of problems that we're having. So obviously with the bacterials, we tend to go to antibiotics. That's what the antibiotics are for. We may, on Clostridium, we've seen a lot of good success to try to knock down the level of shedding that's out in the gestation barns. We may use BMD for that. And then on piglets, Thailand still to this day as an injectable seems to really help those pigs out. If you have really alert people that look for those first little orange spots the first 2 or 3 days in there, and they go in and they treat that liver with Thailand, the next day they look great. So make sure that you're using Thailand in that regard. Viral and protozoa etiologies, We've done some things more to kind of help with general gut health, whether that's phytogenic products, essential oils, things like that. I do believe that there's some good there. They're just a little harder to quantify. We put some resistant starch down on those mats to kind of, it seems like that slows the process through the gut, and it seems to tighten up those intestines a little bit, or the feces that are in them, to try to keep those pigs from dehydrating so badly. And there's obviously options with pre, pro, and postbiotics. I really think they're going to be part of the future of what we need to do with how we feed pigs and how we make sure that they have a good, healthy gut. Because we just can't have leaky gut in these pigs. But really, those are just kind of pacifying us until which time we can get protection from mom when it comes to the virals. Coccidiostats have been a real problem. Number one, there's some that we just can't use because of the compounding rules. Marquis became almost impossible to get unless you were a horse, which I guess that's what it was intended for, right? So you kind of hate to take it away from the horse people. And so now it can be used, just to make sure everybody understands that. We get it in our heads that we can't use it. Marquis we can use, it's just that it's an extra label, and you have to definitely look at how long your withdrawal is. There's some new ones coming out through some of the vet pharmacies that we're working with. I haven't gotten my hands on them yet, but we're going to try some. But I'll be honest with you, I don't see a lot of coccidia problems. I just don't within my clientele. And I think that's because we're focused on sanitation. We're hammering down on sanitation. We're not moving pigs all over the place. We're not rolling back pigs. And so clean sows coming into the crate with good sanitation in the crate and less movement, we just don't see a lot. Maybe by the time I leave here tomorrow, I'll have 3 calls that say I've got coccidia problems, but I don't think so. So what do I do with immune activation? We got the short term and we're going to treat, but in the long term, we basically go into either vaccination or planned exposure. So I still won't say that I don't have clients that nobody feeds back. There are some that do. There's several that don't at all. But anyway, going into vaccination, we have good commercial vaccines for certain things. We've got E. coli vaccines that work really well. We got Clostridium perfringens C. I'm assuming they work very well because I don't see any and hear of any. And then we also got one that has a rotavirus A component in it as well. And it seems like it honestly does some cross protection. We like homology, but if you don't want to make it too difficult and you just have a rotavirus A problem, probably not a bad place to start. Okay? You may at some point say, man, I need more than that. Just kind of depends. The good news is for the things that we don't have commercial vaccines, we have some pretty nice effective options. Autogenous vaccines, we're now, oddly enough, we can grow rotavirus fairly readily. Not every time if it's type A. If it's type B and C, it's a good luck problem. Okay? So on rotavirus A, you can actually make an autogenous for that. And then that's where we also get with my number one early diarrhea problem, Clostridium perfringens A. We can get those. Make sure if you go there that you end up using one, if possible, that has a lot of toxin production. And the reason is because even though we're making a Bacterin, which is against Clostridium itself, it actually creates what we call toxoid in there by default. They can't plan it and make a toxoid on purpose, but in the process, you'll get some toxoid in there, and that helps protect as well. And then, thank goodness, I mean, the blessing to me has been prescription platform vaccines. We have, they're both, the two that are out there are both mRNA related, one of which would be a mRNA product directly, the other one be the proteins off of those mRNA to keep it simple. But it works really good for viral etiologies on certain items. So what we go in there is I don't have to grow that. Because right now, sapovirus is very difficult to grow. We got viruses like rotavirus B, rotavirus C with enterics that are almost impossible to grow, and if you grew them, it's hard to propagate them and make enough of them. So what we do there is the good news is the immunologists understand the gene of interest, the section of that genetic code, and they splice that out and they use that in order to synthesize us a vaccine, okay? And they work. If you get the right organisms in there, the right sequences in there, they work and they work well. So we're really fortunate there, because it wouldn't have done me much good to find out it was sapovirus 3-4 years ago if I didn't have a solution. So we're really, really pleased with that. On the planned exposure, on feedback material, my big thing here is you may have to modify the timing, okay? We've started on some farms that still want to do it. We will give them feedback more so when we wean the sows. So they're a long ways from eventually getting to the farrowing barn. So with that, we believe with our good sanitation, we're likely to kind of quash that before it heads into the farrowing barn. The other thing we do is, and I can't say I was responsible for this, two of my colleagues, Jeremy Pittman with Smithfield and Deb Murray with New Fashion Pork, were the ones that kind of coached me through the ice cube model of getting and collecting those diarrhea litters, getting the organisms figured out that's in that, what you save back and frozen, and making that into ice cubes by which to more predictably give feedback. And the other nice thing we can do there is we can test that for coccidia, we can test that for Clostridium, and make sure we're not feeding back more problems. Okay, so that has worked pretty well in combination with vaccinating on the backside. The other one is that where the feedback probably does make sense is in your GDUs. On the maiden gilts and getting them exposure and getting them used to some of those bugs, and then later coming back in with vaccination. That's worked really, really well in that. So you start looking at this, it is complex. We got how many bacteria, we got how many different strains of virus. Not only do I have C, I might have 2 rotavirus Cs. So really doing your homework here is the only way you're going to get to a good solution. So a little bit more detail. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes? Okay. So a little more detail here, just Clostridium perfringens type A. We've hit on some of this. Sanitation is key. I really think that might be one of the most important pieces of it. Stop that pre-farrow feedback if you've got a big Clostridium problem, because you're just going to keep feeding it. And then antibiotics can be a role, autogenous vaccine can be a role, and then does that apply to type C? I'm not sure, I just haven't dealt with it. E. coli, usually pretty simple. It actually does probably respond to feedback, and decently well so, just so you don't bring other problems with it. But really, in general, the commercial vaccines and the autogenous have worked pretty darn well. We actually do some autogenous, not because the commercials don't work, but because we might want to combine that with something else. Coccidiosis, that's what coccidiosis does. That's in a nursery pig. That's brutal. I mean, that's like you could just go in there and just peel off his lining because it's just corroded. It looks like a dirty water line inside. And so those pigs are not absorbing their nutrients like they should. We have to deal with those. With sanitation is a big one. And I keep going back to make sure you break the biofilm down, make sure you use hot water, and then disinfect appropriately. And then on the virals, again, we have a combination of commercial vaccines. There's a little picture there of some of the work we did with sapovirus, showing the lesions and then also the staining in some of those cells that show that it was right down there and actually causing the problem. We've used on the type B and C in the sapovirus, we've gone to prescription platforms, plus or minus the ice cube method. So to review. Do not live with diarrhea. You can't afford it. It costs you in lactation, but remember, those gut cells are never the same the rest of that pig's life. Okay? They might get better, but they're never the same. Cost downstream is probably immeasurable. I really wish we could somehow do that study of what diarrhea is worth every single year from lactation as a source. Enterically challenged pigs cost all the way. Be definitive and inclusive in your pathogen control. Don't just chase one thing. Make sure that you've got a complete package. And then step 1 is always look at the management factors. Always look at the management factors. What could we get better at in the farrowing house and in the gestation barn? And then just make sure you use all the tools you have judiciously to pull it all together, and you will be able to beat scours. That's all I got. I didn't get to the bonus material. That's okay. That's for another day.
Let's see if we got questions.
Yeah. Paul.
What's the scary stuff coming at us?
The scary stuff coming at us?
Yeah, what else is out there? I mean, we got sapo,
Yeah, yeah. So we were blessed with next generation sequencing, right? Shotgun genomics. So basically, we can take a tissue, or we can take serum, or we can take whatever material, and amazingly, with the PCRs that we can do, we find all kinds of things that we didn't even know were there. Doesn't mean that they're new stuff. They might be old stuff that we finally can find. Right now, so you kind of have to filter through those. Which ones matter, which ones don't, okay? And that really becomes an individual practitioner, right? You know, as far as doing that. I had to convince people that SAPL really was a problem and it wasn't just some oddball thing. And now I think we're, you know, it's become like I said, it's become in the usual suspect category. You know, PCV3 actually came out before that, and I'm a believer. I'll just give you my bias. PCV3 is real. It tends to look different in different situations because of the timing of when pigs are infected and when they're not. The one that I'm probably watching the closest now is Astrovirus 4. The good news with Astrovirus 4 is in uncomplicated situations, it's just you get tired of hearing pigs cough. Now, even in uncomplicated situations, I've seen some of those where the producers say, I got to fix this because my pigs will turn blue and die because they're coughing so hard. Now, it's not flu, but it's not good. But then you throw that in with a complicator like flu, now I got a double whammy. I got COVID and I got flu at the same time, all right? So those are probably the big ones that are on my radar. I'm very, very nervous about JEV, the Japanese encephalitis virus. That one is one that could sneak in. And if at Layman, we actually had Chris Richards from Australia come and talk. And when they ultimately got to the end of the day, after they figured out it was there, it had probably been over there over a month in the country. And so that one makes me a little bit cringy because it looks like a lot of other things. And obviously we got ASF kind of on our radar all the time. The good news is it is highly on everybody's radar. Jack.
SAPL virus. So does the mRNA vaccine, the prescriptive vaccine, work fine alone, or does it require feedback before? Does a combined strategy work better than just the mRNA
Yeah.
vaccine?
So to this point, I have not been able to show or met any practitioner that was able to show that feedback helps SAPL virus. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but I just haven't. That was our first response. When we found SAPL virus, what are we going to do about it? We had no solution. So we said, well, it's an enteric virus. Let's feed it back. And it didn't get worse, but it didn't get better. And so at this point, I don't target feedback for the SAPL virus. It appears to me if we do a great job with vaccination, we will cover it really, really well. There are a couple genotypes there. So you want to know which type that you have. They can sequence that, costs a little bit of money, I understand. But you want to make sure if you're going to get it, you get it right.
What's the prevalent one?
What's that?
Which is the prevalent one?
They call it the type 1. It was the one that we originally found. It's about 80% of the cases.
So you mentioned that the whitewashing is negotiable?
To me, it is. That's a touchy subject, right?
Yeah, my question is, how do you negotiate that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, don't have scours, and then it's taken care of. You know, it really comes down to maybe an accumulation of a couple things that I saw today, especially when it came to that discussion on people. If you train people and you really dedicate the time to them, because it was at Ochoa that was talking, anyway, he was talking about the TNs and what they want. Well, they want training. And all of a sudden I'm like, isn't that what everybody wants? Everybody wants to be trained. I don't want to know, go dig the hole. I want to know why I'm digging the hole and maybe when I'm going to be done. And why do we have to keep digging holes? You know, so the training really comes down to it, and that's really where our biggest block is. How many places have training programs? That's one thing. But how many places really have training programs and really take the time to teach people? And so the only way that's negotiable is if you can build the confidence within your structure of your farms and within your corporate team or lack of corporate team, whatever kind of farms you're in, is you have to build the confidence that it's not necessarily if I can do everything else right. It's, to me, in the systems we work with, we do it occasionally, but it's like the last ditch effort. It's because we really don't want to bring in all these bags. We really don't want to do all this mixing. It's messy. It's messy. It can create other problems. But by golly, if that's what it takes at the end of the day, we're going to do it.
Anything else? If not, let's thank Tom.